Hey, what's up, Superdads? So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about isometrics, which I know is a popular or increasingly popular topic on the interwebs. Certainly seems like a lot of people are falling in love with it, and rightfully so. It's an amazing form of training, really unparalleled in a lot of ways. When I started, training in isometrics a long time ago, probably 20 years ago, there was a pervasive recommendation, let's call it, that you needed to train any isometric movement in three different positions. It would be the lengthened position, the middle position, and the contracted position. And you needed to do one of each at a minimum. And the reasons given for this were that, yes, isometrics built strength very quickly and effectively and safely and all those things, but it only built that strength in a very narrow angle. We'll call this angular specificity, which I believe is the technical term for it. So isometrics, compared with dynamic movements, for obvious reasons, suffered from an angular specificity problem, and you had to balance that out by training it in three different positions. Now, I'm going to address whether that's a myth today, or whether I think it's a myth, whether I think, the limited research that I've read, but also my own personal experience and, just common sense bears it out, and what you should do in terms of your isometric training, recommendation-wise. So, in his book, The Ultimate Isometrics Manual, Coach Paul Wade tries to dispel this myth, and I think he does a pretty good job. And he does so basically by making a couple points. The first point he makes is based on research findings that showed that, if you train only in one position, it's not that the strength you get from training in one position is limited to the angular specificity. You gain strength throughout the range of motion, which makes sense in a way. Because if you think, your muscle gets stronger, well, it doesn't make sense that your muscle would get a whole lot stronger and then be still weak if my muscle is really strong here, why would it be super weak here? It's the same muscle, right? And a lot of building muscle is adding muscular, fibers and things the things in the muscle that actually do the contracting. And so if I've added muscle, what does it do? They just turn off when I get outside the specific angle that I trained them in? That doesn't make much sense. Go on vacation or something like that. That's not how muscles work. So he presents evidence that shows that you can train in one angle and gain strength throughout the entire range of motion. With the caveat, however, the strength gains at the angle that was trained will be relatively greater than the strength gains that happen elsewhere. So, in a way, this does dispel the myth. It still leaves a door open, though, to somebody who would say, well, what if I want to, develop the same amount of strength across time, across my training in the entire range of motion. I don't want just the middle range of motion to get super strong while everything else gets merely strong. And, fair criticism, fair point, I would say. He goes on then and adds a couple more points, one of which is that a lot of this might just have to do with the natural limitations of the leverage, the mechanical limitations. So your muscles aren't equally strong throughout the range of motion. We know this is a strength curve of a muscle, and it has to do with your physiology, just how your body fits together, right? If you have a long arm, if you have a really long forearm, say, right, certain moves are going to be harder. Same with squats and deadlifts. People who are born for squatting or born for deadlifting just based upon the way that their body, the length of the various pieces and all that kind of stuff. Well, in general, when you're doing something like a bicep curl, you're going to be strongest right in this middle region of it, right around in here. And so these parts, because they're not naturally as strong, it would make sense that they suffer from a limitation on how much stronger they can get, right? At your strongest position, you're going to have a higher cap. There's going to be, let's take like a squat, right? In the, if you only do the very top of the squat, which is the easiest part, you can get incredibly strong with, or rather I should say, you can raise your numbers to an incredible degree if all you're doing is the top quarter of the squat or the top third of the squat. You won't be able to experience the same amount of growth in those numbers from the bottom third of the squat, the hardest part of the squat. Even taking into account that they're starting lower, so their starting position for the lower portion of the squat, your starting number may be way lower, it will be way lower than for the top third of the position. But the top third has more capacity for growth because it's just benefits in so many ways. And so when you're looking at something like this isometric training and angular specificity, it might just be that the angle people are training it at has more capacity for strength increase, which is why the strength increases across the entire range of motion, but especially in the angle that they're training. And this brings us to the research limitations, which are, I don't think there's much research, I certainly haven't seen any, that points to like, if you were to just train the really contracted position, would that mean that the really contracted position gets a lot stronger relative to the strength gains of the middle position? I don't think there's research that says that, because almost all of the research takes place at the most sensible place to train a contraction, like the middle position where you're most able to produce force. Because again, that's where you're going to see the most changes happen in, the most results. And that's what they're looking for. So there is a lack of research, some research limitations, but there's also a lot of mechanical limitations that point to the fact that it might just be in the nature of your mechanical design to not gain strength equally throughout these motions. I think there could be something to it though, that yes, the idea is that your muscles could get real strong and then they just turn off, or they just stop being strong once you make it past some relatively arbitrary angular, specific angle of movement. Seems kind of nonsensical. But you take a look at the specific adaptation to impose demands principle, the SAID principle, and like in a more general everyday example, right? If you drive a car, if those of you who drive, you'll know that you can learn the skill of driving in terms of paying attention to the things that are happening around you, learning to read the road signs, these sorts of things. Those are sort of general skills of driving. But if you're used to driving in one car and that's the only car you've driven in for however many years, and then you change cars, there's generally a little bit of a hairy period at the beginning, a little bit of there's some difficulty that you're going to encounter because you're flipping the wrong turn signal or whatever, or maybe you don't know how to shift gears, or just you don't know where the blind spots are, or whatever it is. Okay, this is an everyday example, but it's a metaphor that applies as well to your body. Your body adapts very specifically to the demands you put on it. So there is a way potentially in which your body could be saying I'm only learning this very narrow skill, which is contracting the muscle very hard in this position. Now, and so in terms of your neurology, in terms of the neurological learning, you're getting your strength gains. The neurological strength gains might be limited to that range, whereas the sort of mechanical or muscular strength gains carry through the range of motion because, adding muscle, it doesn't go on vacation when you get past that specific angle. So long story short, I think that there's reasons on both sides to think that, that you might be experiencing, you're gaining strength throughout. I think that that's not up for debate anymore. It's pretty clear that, a stronger muscle is a stronger muscle. And it could be the case that the neurological gains, in terms of your nervous system's ability to contract hard might be specifically limited to that angular. Now, it doesn't mean that your muscle's not getting stronger. It is. It's just not getting as strong in that position because it's lacking the neurological adaptation portion of the strengthening. So what are the recommendations? I would recommend that you train close to your sticking point if the reason you're using isometrics is to improve performance on like a lift, for example. So say you're trying to improve your squat and the bottom of your squat is crap compared to the rest of your squat. Well, you'd want to train isometrically, overcoming isometrics in that bottom position, pretty much exclusively, because you'll gain strength throughout the squat motion by doing that, but you'll help bring up your what's lagging by doing that, potentially by training the neurology in that position. So if that's something you're interested in, then that's the recommendation I would give. As for hypertrophy, I generally only do one position these days because it saves time. But also, I find that if you're going to train isometrics or hypertrophy, really what you just want is the lengthened position in most cases. So for a biceps curl, like this would be a good thing. I do this sometimes, but I find the lengthened position, not completely lengthened because it's hard to put enough force in to really feel like you're working, but mostly lengthened works out best. And there is recent research on lengthened positions being more effective for hypertrophy. I don't know how much you can put into that, but I like the feeling of the stretch. It you get more. It feels like it gets more blood into there, and things like extreme stretching are pretty well founded in the literature. Extreme stretching being where you put the muscle under load and hold it in an lengthened position. So at the end of a set of curls, let's say, you keep the weight in your hand, prop your elbow against your body, and it like lengthens out your bicep. And you can't just let it hang there. It's not loose. You're keeping tension in the muscle. So in a lot of ways, an extreme stretching is just lengthened overcoming isometrics, where you're fighting against some sort of weight. All right. So I would recommend you do most of your hypertrophy isometric work in the lengthened position. And, otherwise, if you have time and all the only work that you do is isometric, then go for it. Do the three positions if you prefer, if you just want variety. I think it's an easy way to get, a little bit more time near failure in your training. So, those are the specific recommendations, but of course, play with it and see what works for you. All right. Thank you so much for watching. If you're interested in programs that really make good use of isometrics and incorporate them in sort of unique ways with dynamic training and, applying HIIT principles, these sorts of things, you can check them out below. There's a free one down there, as well as a dumbbell, a bodyweight, and one that's for people in advanced age. There's also a Facebook group if you want to get lots of, personal contact and good advice and stuff. Questions and answers to questions to answers. Okay. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Take it easy. I hope you have a great day.